What's up, everybody? True Boxing here. Thank you for coming back to Get Hit with the Truth. So today we are doing the WBA Champions Report as I continue my series of Champions Reports at the end of every 2 months. Before we get into that, if you guys could smash the like button, leave a comment, subscribe to the channel. I really do appreciate any and all support that I can get as I try to build my channel up. And if there's anything you don't like, you can always give me a thumbs down or leave a comment letting me know why and all that kind of stuff. And that's it. So as I do with my Champions Reports, if you haven't seen them, is I cover all WBA titles from the World Boxing Association, from 122 pounds all the way to heavyweight. That's all the main champions, or super champs as they're called in some divisions, and the regular champs, which we only have a handful of those left. So let's jump right in and start at 122 pounds, where the champion is Marlon Taplis. He is the unified champ. He won the IBF and WBA the NWBA titles in April when he defeated MJ Marajan Akhmadaliev. Since then, there's been talks of him fighting for the undisputed title at the end of the year. Those talks were legit because the WBA came out in June and announced that they are clearing the road for Taplis to be able to challenge the winner of Stephen Fulton Jr. and Naoya Inoue, the Monster, as they fight at the end of July. So it looks like Taplis is going to get the winner for the undisputed title by the end of the year, which is exciting. So hopefully we know a little bit more about a roadmap to that once the fight between Fulton and Inoue is over, and hopefully by the next Champions Report, which is at the end of August, we'll have a more clear direction. 126 featherweight. The champion there is Lee Wood. Lee Wood in May regained the WBA title, a title he had lost in February to Mauricio Lara, where he was winning on the scorecards and got stopped in the 7th round of that fight. This time, after Lara missed weight the day before, Lee Wood, the fight would go forward, and Lee Wood would outbox and outclass Lara, beating him soundly by unanimous decision as he regained the WBA title. That puts Lee Wood in an interesting position. His people, especially Eddie Hearn and Matchroom, want him to fight Josh Warrington in an all-UK matchup right here, a big one. But the WBA could order Wood to face his mandatory, some undefeated fighter who's 12-0 with 10 knockouts. He doesn't want to do that, and he wants to go straight into Josh Warrington. There's even talks that he could vacate the title if the WBA forces him. So hopefully by the next Champions Report, we got a more clear direction on what Lee Wood is doing next, and if he's going to defend against former champ Josh Warrington. 130 super featherweight. The champion there is Hector Luis Garcia. He hasn't defended the title the title hasn't been online since he won it last August when he defeated Roger Gutierrez. He moved up to 135 in January and got stopped against Gervonta Tank Davis as he fought for Davis's secondary belt there. He was ordered to make a mandatory defense against Lamont Roach Jr., and that fight is supposed to be going through. They're just waiting for it to be finalized 100% across the board, but that fight is going through and should happen sometime this summer between Hector Luis Garcia and Lamont Roach Jr. Hopefully it doesn't happen before the next Champions Report. Hopefully it's on the schedule, and we can, I will give my prediction once the fight is officially finalized. 135 lightweight. The reigning champion there at lightweight is Devin Haney. He's also the undisputed champion. He holds all 4 titles. He defeated Vasily Lomachenko by a controversial 12-round unanimous decision in May on ESPN pay-per-view. Now there's a couple options on the table for him. The first option is that he could move up to 140 and vacate his belts and try try to become a 2-division world champ. He's been talking about moving up for a while now. That would upgrade Gervonta Tank Davis to full champion if he were to do that. Then there's also the possibility of him facing Gervonta Tank Davis. Nothing has come from that as of yet, but that fight and a rematch with Vasily Lomachenko are the only two possible fights that I see Haney staying at 135 for. So hopefully by the next Champions Report we have an answer on which direction Haney is going in. I personally want it to be a rematch with Lomachenko though. 140 junior welterweight, the champion there is Rolly Romero. Alberto Puello was stripped of the title prior to a defense against I think he was supposed to fight Rolly Romero, and they scratched the fight and plugged in Ishmael Barroso, and Romero scored a controversial 9th round TKO over him. Now, the initial talks, now that Romero is the champ, is that he's supposed to make a mandatory defense of his title against O'Hara Davies of the United Kingdom next. And the winner could have to fight former champ Alberto Puello, who technically is the champion in recess, I guess, because he's suspended. So that title might be locked up through the first half of next year between these three fighters. And that's not even including if Ishmael Barroso is going to get another crack. So hopefully by the end of August, we have a little bit more clear direction on what's happening at 140 pounds. Also, I need to go back and look at Gervonta Tank Davis at 135. He is the current regular champion there. I forgot we were doing regular champions. Tank doesn't have his next fight locked up yet. He hasn't defended this belt since January when he defeated Hector Luis Garcia, who moved up to fight him. I don't know. I think Tank might be taking a little bit of time off following his big win over Ryan Garcia, where they met at that catchweight of 136. I personally think that Tank's probably going to take on Isaac Cruz towards the end of the year. Isaac Cruz is returning on the Crawford-Spence undercard, but I think Cruz will get a win, and then Tank might. I think I'm favoring him to fight Isaac Cruz next towards the end of the year. But you know, Tank does have the Devin Haney fight on the table if he wants it. He can pretty much get who he wants. So I'm very interested in seeing what he decides to do, but I really think it's going to be Isaac Cruz. But hopefully by the next Champions Report, we got a little bit more clear direction. Now let's jump back to where we were, which is 147. The champion at welterweight is the unified champ and undefeated Errol Spence Jr. Now, Errol Spence Jr. has signed on for the biggest fight of his career. He will defend his WBA and unified title, all three belts, against the undefeated WBO champion Terrence Crawford as they attempt to unify all four titles at welterweight to determine an undisputed welterweight champion. This is huge right here. This is a mega fight. The winner will likely be the front runner for pound. There's a rematch clause in the contract for the loser. This fight takes place Saturday, July 29th on Showtime pay-per-view. Gonna be great. I'm predicting Terrence Crawford to take the WBA and unified title away from Errol Spence and become the undisputed champion. Now, if that happens, I don't believe the second fight will be for all four belts. I think Crawford's going to end up giving up at least one, but maybe two belts, and I think the WBA title could be one of those belts that goes vacant, because Crawford would have an obligation to the winner of the regular title fight, and I'll segue into that, between Imantas Stanionis and Virgil Ortiz Jr. They are locking horns on Saturday, July 8th in the main event of a DAZN card, and I don't think Crawford wants to have his hands tied and locked down, so I think there's a chance that by the next Champions Report, the winner of Stanionis and Virgil Ortiz, which I think is going to be Virgil Ortiz, is going to be upgraded to full champion by that point. It's possible. And the winner of the Crawford-Spence fight will just end up holding on to a couple of the belts. But that's just speculation. The winner could definitely still have all the titles. But again, don't sleep. That's July 29th Showtime pay-per-views, Crawford versus Spence. But also on July 8th on DAZN, the regular title, Stanionis versus Virgil Ortiz. That's a big fight right there at welterweight as well. 154 super welterweight. The reigning WBA and undisputed champion is Jermell Charlo. He holds all 4 major world titles at 154 pounds. We know his fight with Tim Tszyu has been postponed a couple times due to Charlo recovering from injury. It looks like the WBO is next in line for Charlo to make a mandatory against. He has to fight Tim Tszyu next, who's his interim champ and mandatory challenger. The WBO ordered that fight to take place by September. It looks like right now they have an October working date, and I do believe that's what's going to happen. I do believe Charlo's going to fight Tim Tszyu by September, October. I'm hoping by the next Champions Report we have that fight signed and sealed and ready to go. 160 middleweight. The champion there is Erislandy Lara. Lara was upgraded to champion when Triple G Gennady Golovkin decided to throw in the towel as the unified champ at middleweight. That upgraded Erislandy Lara. Lara was ordered to face his WBA mandatory and Michael Zarafa, but an exception was made. Zarafa was given step-aside money, and it looks like Lara is going to be facing Danny Garcia, the former 2-division world champ, at a catch weight of 155 pounds sometime during the summer. I'm waiting to hear about that. I hope we hear something about that very soon, so we can see that fight go down, and the winner would have to face off against Michael Zarafa of Australia. 168 super middleweight. The reigning WBA and undisputed champion is Saul Canelo Alvarez. Canelo returned in May, successfully defended all 4 of his titles when he dominated his WBO mandatory challenger John Ryder to a one-sided 12-round unanimous decision, put him down a couple times, beat him up, and stayed the undisputed champion. Canelo just signed a 3-fight deal with the PBC and Showtime, and he will be returning in September to defend his undisputed title, likely against Jermell Charlo, the undefeated middleweight champ. Hasn't been 100% finalized yet, but that's what it's looking like, that those 2 guys will lock horns in September. By the next Champions Report, we should know officially what's going to go down and who's going to fight who. Also at 168, the regular champion is the undefeated David Morrell. David Morrell has been linked to a big showdown with David Benavidez. We know Canelo's not going to fight Benavidez next, most likely not. So Benavidez and Morrell have already agreed to a fight in principle, but nothing is 100% finalized. So it looks like they're going to fight in October, November possibly. But if they don't, I think there's a chance that Morrell could face Demetrius Andrade, as long as Andrade isn't fighting Benavidez instead. So a lot of things, a lot of moving pieces at 168 with the regular title. And I'm interested in seeing if Morrell's going to get that big fight next that he's been wanting. 175 light heavyweight. The reigning and undefeated champion there is Dimitri Bivol. Bivol was supposed to be fighting Canelo, and that fight fell when Canelo wouldn't budge on paying him the same amount of money as the first time. Now Bivol is waiting around to defend the title against somebody. There's been talks of him possibly taking on Dan Aziz, who's the number 2 contender in the WBA. There's also been talks about him facing off against former 2-time world title challenger Anthony Yard. Nothing is concrete. Bivol said he wants to return in the late summer, early fall, and defend his title. We'll see what happens. That's it for him. Next at 122, cruiserweight, is Arsen Goulamirian. Goulamirian, we have no clue what's going on with him. There was talks originally about him fighting Richard Riakporhe and setting up a unification bout with Lawrence Okolie if Okolie got by Chris Billum-Smith. We haven't heard anything about that. Riakporhe is moving on to fight Jai Opetaia next, most likely. He's been ordered by the IBF. Chris Billum-Smith upset Lawrence Okolie, and now he looks like he's fighting Mateusz Masternak. Goulamirian seems to be the guy left waiting out in the cold. I don't know if they're going to force him to make a mandatory. You got Junior Dortigos, the former 3-time world champion or 2-time world champ, is sitting there waiting, but he hasn't fought in a long time. So Going to be very interesting to see what Arsen Goulamirian does next. Hopefully we know by the next Champions Report at the end of August where he's going and what he's doing. And finally, the heavyweight champion is, the WBA Unified Heavyweight Champion is Alexander Usyk. Usyk, we're not, well, we know that August 26th, he's most likely returning to take on Daniel Dubois, the WBA regular champion and mandatory challenger right now. That's going to be a good one if that fight still indeed takes place on the 16th. I got Usyk winning that fight by a late stoppage or a unanimous decision, but I really do think Dubois has a solid puncher's chance of pulling off the upset. I think it's going to be a good fight. I'm really looking forward to it. Again, that's August 26th, most likely, on a card from Poland. So that's it. That's what I got. That's the WBA Champions Report as I cover all championships from 122 all the way to heavyweight. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, smash the like button, leave a comment, subscribe to the channel. I appreciate any and all support. This is True Boxing. You've been hit with the truth.